Hi, I'm Solène, and today we're wrapping up our series, Help. We talked about a couple things. Well, first of all, we started off with how God helps us see people the way He sees them. Then we spoke about how we can be who God created us to be. After that we should do the right thing, and finally, to love our enemies. All of this goes to show that God helps us, and He's there for us. But there's one last thing, and it's pretty amazing. God helps us when we are sad. Now let's watch today's God story.
The man told him what he... Hi friends, my name is Zulema, and I was thinking the other day about the time that I had to move away from my best friend. We had spent so much time together. We lived close together so we could see each other every day and hang out. We talked on the phone and we went away together. We went to restaurants and all that stuff. And then when I had to move, it was like all of those things just had to end. And that made me really sad. And so we started to think about what we could do to stay in contact with each other, because we were actually going to be in different countries. And so we set up phone dates where we would choose a date in the calendar and a time, and we would phone each other and just catch up and hear how everybody was doing. And that reminds me of today's big idea, that God helps us when we're sad. I know that in our world, we've seen a bunch of sad stuff lately. I mean, living in a pandemic, we see a lot of sad things happening every day. And while people try to turn to a lot of different things when they are sad, the emphasis today is that God will help us when we're sad. He'll help us more than any other thing that we could turn to. Last time, we learned that King Saul and his son Jonathan had died, but David hadn't heard this news yet. Now don't forget, Saul was very jealous of David, and Jonathan was David's best friend and Saul's son. We're actually into 2 Samuel today. David had just won a battle against another group called the Amalekites, and he had just returned to camp. 3 days after he had returned to camp, a man ran up to David and his clothes were torn and dusty and dirty. Think about what you look like after you've done a workout and you've run up a hill and you're just covered with sweat and you feel gross and icky. He fell in front of David as a sign of respect. And when David asked him where he had come from, he said he had come from Israel's camp, and David asked him what had happened. The man told him what we already know, that Saul and his son Jonathan were killed in battle. And David asked him how he knew this, and the man replied that he had seen it happen. David was so sad that he tore his clothes, and that was something that they did back then to show their grief. Everyone there was filled with sadness. And the Bible tells us that no one ate anything until the evening because Saul and Jonathan had been killed by swords. Then David did something that may seem strange to us today, but back then it was completely normal. David wrote a song of sadness about Saul and Jonathan, because not only was David a warrior, but he was also a poet. And we can find lots of his poems in the Bible and the book of Psalms. The Song of Sadness starts, Israel, a gazelle lies dead on your hills. Your mighty men have fallen. A lot of David's writing has metaphors and imagery in it like this. He writes all about how sad he is that Saul and Jonathan have died. Another line says, how beloved and gracious were Saul and Jonathan. They were together in life and in death. They were swifter than eagles, stronger than lions. David was in deep pain, and he called out in sadness about his brother. And even though Jonathan wasn't his brother through birth, they were so close that they were like brothers, and David felt like a family member had died. Often when we're sad, we listen to sad songs. And that's exactly what David did by writing this psalm. It was him expressing his sadness. God gives us different ways to mourn or grieve, and that simply means a way to express our sadness. For some of us, we may just want to be left alone, and others may want to do something with their hands, and some may want to go for a walk or a run, and others may want to do something artistic or do something active. Just like with heaps of other stuff in our lives, we all express our sadness in different ways. But God, in His goodness, wants to help us and comfort us when we're sad. Just talk to Him and tell Him what's going on. He's a good, good God and wants to love us all the time. Friends, thanks so much for spending some time with me today. See you later.
David was really sad when his best friend passed away, but he cried out to God and wrote poems to express his feelings. I want us to look at Rachel's story. It wasn't in her best interest to stay with her family, so she moved into a group home where she would be taken care of. All of this caused a lot of sadness, but let's see what happened after that.
So when I'm on a horse or beside a horse or just with horses, I just feel this amazing peace. I feel like all my issues are gone, all the depression, anxiety, everything is just gone, and I just focus on the horses and just feel like amazing love. I knew that there was something wrong with my learning, and I knew that I struggled, and I had this diagnosis of a communication-based disability. I remember in grade 1, every single time I keep going, ask the teacher, can you help me with this? Can you help me with this? Every single day, for every single lesson, that would be my question. Growing up, I had a teacher who said I wouldn't be able to graduate and I wouldn't be able to be a cashier, and just my life would really go nowhere. I felt like I was garbage. I felt like, what is my purpose? I felt like I was just hopeless and worthless, and that, what am I gonna do then? So I was living in a home that was really unsafe, and I ended up telling the support staff, and they said that they called the police, and the police deemed it not safe to live there. There were no shelters at that time available, so I was shipped to Niagara Falls, and then I was shipped to another youth shelter, and then for a few months I was actually on the streets, and then I was put into like 4 different lodging homes. I was in my darkest time, and it was one of the times when I was on the street by myself, and I just felt like I was hopeless. I felt like there's nothing left, and this girl screams, I'm a Christian, God loves you, God loves you, I'm a Christian, God loves you. And she just gave me a hug, and she said, like, look, God loves you and wants you, like, come on, like, trust him and follow him. And then about a week later, I accepted Christ into my life. I finally felt like I was worth it, and I had this sense of hope, so I decided that I was gonna graduate and I was gonna do cash, and that I was gonna be able to do things in life that I never thought that I'd be able to. After that, I was still homeless, but I would volunteer many places. I volunteered actually helping the homeless on Tuesdays and giving food on Wednesdays. So I volunteer at a restaurant called 541 Eatery and Exchange, and what we do is it's a pay-it-forward restaurant, and the roles that I do is I'm a cashier, I serve food, and just interact with the customers as well. I now go horseback riding. I just get to do a lot of fun things. I live in a group home, and I have my own room, which for the whole year I didn't have my own room, which is like such a small thing, but it's a big thing. And knowing that you can go somewhere when you're having a rough day and just be by yourself. With God, I was able to forgive my teacher, and I was also able to forgive the family issues, and to truly understand what forgiveness is, and forgiving every single day, more and more. I'm Rachel. I love Jesus. He's so amazing. He can help through every situation.
Rachel went through a tough time, and although her circumstances didn't change dramatically, the way she experienced life really did after she accepted Jesus. She felt better and had hope for the future, and was able to do things that people never thought she'd be able to do. Rachel experienced how God turned her sadness into happiness, and that's so inspirational. Well, now it's time to break into small groups and see what this will look like in our lives.